is just fantastic. Hello everyone, welcome back to Omegon 2 Electric Boogaloo. Today I'd like to talk about the monumental, calamitous decline fall of Netflix. Does that require a sarcasm sign? Times have changed for the streaming giant, and with those changes they themselves have to change. It's curious to see where they are willing to budge and where they are not willing to budge and why they would or would not budge. And by that I'm of course referring to those that they choose to associate with, what projects they decide to push with, and who they stand beside when the criticisms, the flack, the pushback is substantial. But before we get to those parts, we now need to talk about coronavirus. During lockdown, many of us, we were stuck indoors for a bit. Some of us were not, for various reasons, essential worker, or we were an ejibai, and or others. I could only think of those two from the top of my head. Because of what was dubbed lockdown, many people sought out means of entertaining themselves during those rather boring times. I myself threw myself into my YouTube channel. Others took up hobbies. Others did both and made time to watch Netflix or listen to Spotify. In fact, during lockdown, the use of streaming platforms went up considerably. Did it improve the quality of the product? I'm not entirely sure. That is debatable. I don't watch Netflix, so I don't actually know. But as lockdowns came to an end last year, things changed for many of us. Many YouTube creators who thrived under lockdown because many people were at home do not thrive as much anymore because those same people that watched them during lockdown are now back living their lives. The exact same thing can now be said for platforms like Netflix, where they have seen a huge drop in subscriptions because people aren't as available or willing to stick with Netflix because they themselves have work and other things going on. No doubt cherishing the life that they now have that was rudely, abruptly, unfairly taken from them. By all means, make of that what you will and debate it in the comments. I couldn't care less. Lockdown was a pain in the ass, alright? This, by the way, is why the video is called The Decline of Netflix. That's not to say Netflix is going anywhere, and I don't believe they will be anyway. There is another factor that could well be pushing people towards cancelling their subscription with the platform, and that would be the content that they promote, or content they don't want to see. In the case of the content that they promote, comedian specials is quite the notorious one. Dave Chappelle, Jimmy Carr, Ricky Gervais, they have all produced specials for Netflix, and all of them in some way have managed to incur the wrath of the keyboard warrior. Others who have not been promoted, or have been but to, let's say, diminished results, nowhere near that of those specials, would be Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who have had some of their projects cancelled because of a bit of penny pinching. Understandably so. If they are losing money, they're not going to invest in things that they themselves do not believe will do anywhere near as well as controversy in the form of comedians challenging what others do and do not say, because many of them have realized, or always realized, that the window of acceptable jokes has gotten incredibly small, and they want to change that. Netflix are currently producing a documentary with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry on their lives, which I found highly amusing for one main reason. Prince Harry's been very anti-journalist for a long time. He doesn't want cameras up close with him at the best of times. Unless he's getting paid for it, of course, in which case he's 100% fine with it. He is finally attending the Queen's Jubilee. Netflix, of course, want to be there. However, they do not have permission to be there, which means if they do attend, they will be, and I quote, moved on by the stewards. Good luck filming that. I guess you better get your mobile phone out and do it from a distance. Yes. And no doubt the reason Netflix would want to be there is because there is a rumour, not much of a rumour, pretty much a fact, that Harry and Meghan have more ammunition to levy at the royal family. So while the Queen in her twilight years attempts to repair her family, he is preparing to be a massive tosser. So the Netflix CEO has said that the company's recent 75% stock drop was horrifying, disappointing, and embarrassing for the streaming platform, which in the first 3 months of this year lost 200,000 subscribers. and in April alone lost $54 billion after seeing its shares drop from $348 to $195. When speaking to the New York Times, Ted Sarandos, the CEO, said, "We make decisions based on the best information we have at the time. They're not always going to be right, but how you help navigate the outcomes and the urgency you bring to it is what gets folks through the storm, and the storms will come." He also acknowledged that adding 10 million subscribers in the first 3 months of lockdown helped the business boom during the pandemic, and that Netflix should have, as a consequence, evaluated its success more carefully. He also went on to address controversy surrounding Dave Chappelle, whose show The Closer came under fire last fall after several activists claimed it contained transphobic and homophobic content. Ted Sarandos firmly stood behind Dave Chappelle, which, as many of you will know, led to an exodus of some of Netflix's workers. During an interview with The Times, Sarandos yet again defended the choice to support Dave Chappelle by saying, "I always said if we censor the US, how are we going to defend our content in the Middle East?" Recently, Netflix announced 150 layoffs and dropped several shows in development, being quoted as saying, "We're all optimistic when we go into these projects, and sometimes they do or do not materialize." Further explaining that Netflix, which has signed up several celebrities with no filmmaking experience, admits that sometimes you take a chance on new talent, but it doesn't always pan out. Being quoted as saying, "You have to bet early on storytellers. My experience with Barack and Michelle is they are phenomenal storytellers." While admitting he was taken surprised by the response to Netflix backing of Chappelle, Sarandos noticed he did not fret over the situation, saying, "I think it's very important to the American culture generally to have free expression. We're programming for a lot of diverse people who have different opinions and different tastes and different styles, and yet we're not making everything for everybody. We want something for everybody, but everything's not going to be for everybody." It was an opportunity to take somebody like in Dave's case, who is by all measures the comedian of our generation, the most popular comedian on Netflix for sure. Nobody would say that what he does isn't thoughtful or smart. You just don't agree with him. Because Ted Sarandos has taken a very firm stance on this, he has been hailed as a conservative hero by some outlets. When asked this week how he felt about being hailed in such a light, he replied, "It used to be a very liberal issue, so it's an interesting time that we live in," further reiterating that standing by Dave Chappelle wasn't hard, as the company is a proponent of free expression, saying, "And rarely do you get the opportunity to put your principles to the test." During that same interview, Ted Sarandos spoke about Ricky Gervais challenging free speech, Netflix's future as other platforms are now trying to catch up with them on streaming sites of their own, while they, Netflix themselves, are behind them in every other respect, i.e. television, but ahead when it comes to streaming itself, along with defending production choices, for example, Emily in Paris, which has been criticized for using outdated stereotypes of French people. I assume it's just one show of a French person waving a white flag. Personally, I think Netflix will bounce back. Everything goes through an up and a down. It is a fact of life, quite frankly. You cannot always expect growth to be continuous. It is truly unsustainable, and everyone knows that. So Netflix will themselves have to adapt to having to be a bit more thoughtful with what shows they choose to produce and what shows they choose not to produce, what they promote, what they don't promote, and so on and so forth.